Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. It is the final day of February, February 29th, Leap Day. It's a Thursday evening. That means it's time for our Hoops HD Bracket Rundown show. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. To my sides up top here, we got John Teitel and Matt Zakowski. Down below me, we got Mike Chott. His sides, John Salika and Joby Fortson. And a little bit of bad news. David Griggs probably will be joining us tonight. He's just running a little bit late. We are kind of hoping to be without him.
Zing!
But anyhow, this is our bracket rundown show where we like to do over the course of about an hour, emulate what the actual selection committee does in about a week. So what we're going to be doing is building a seed list here. We're going to be actually going through each of our panelists here to give us the next teams up, the next seed line, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., until we have a full 1 through 68 seed list by the end of the show. After which we'll bracket it up. And if you want to see those results, you can look down below, but you just completely ruined the show. But on that note, though, before we even get to the seed list, I think it'd be a good day to throw in one more of our favorite games here, the blind resume. And instead of a David Griggs special where we compare Mississippi Valley to somebody else, let's kind of go towards the top of the bracket here tonight with our blind resume. I'll throw us over to a couple of you here. The question of left or right on these two, admittedly very good profiles. Who do you like a little bit better here? And well, Teitel, let me start with you. Left or right? Who do you like a little better here?
Wow. I think it's a coin flip. We'll see if I'm right. I think I'm leaning left mostly for the predictive metrics, which are all one seed worthy. J&G has them as a coin flip. Much of their numbers seem to be a coin flip. So I will lean left and let somebody else take it.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think? You like the predictive metrics? Are you with him left as opposed to the resume metrics?
Yeah, I
Which would
think
go
I lean
right?
left because and I'm just looking at everything, and this is so close. But yeah, just because I slightly lean left, but I think both should be very high.
Joby, you're the resume metric guy. You're J&G narrowly
Yeah.
likes the right. Are you with your J&G?
Well, I mean, it's just, I mean, that's just, I'm going to go, I am actually going to go left for the mere fact that when you dive into tier one, but tier two is better on the right. But
That's
tier
tier
two,
2A.
NIT, those are all NIT teams, 70 or something. Tier one on the left, you've got 6, 13, 24, 29, 22, 29. That's 6 teams in the top 30. Whereas on the right, there's 4 teams in the top 30. But man, this really does. This is where the blind resume, you need to see the teams because maybe the team at 24 isn't as good as the team at 42. Sort of thing. So we just gotta. I'll go left, but it could be right.
Yeah, it looks like Arizona, North
It's really
Carolina.
tight. I mean, I mean, it's they're both deserving of where they are.
Okay, Mike, the two teams are
Looks like Arizona on the left and North Carolina on the right.
ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. Arizona and North Carolina. And I thought this might be a good comparison to start the show off with because, in my personal opinion, the fourth 1 seed is a very big question mark we're going to have, and maybe a debate we have right now as we pull up our seed list here that we're building. Going to go from 1 seeds all the way down, probably till we run out of at-large bids. Then I'm going to fill in the rest at the end of this show. But Teitel, let me swing back over to you to start things off on the one line. And why don't you tell me who the top 4 teams in order are in the nation right now?
The top 3, I think, can be in any order because I can make arguments for all of them. I will stick with the Purdue, UConn, Houston order, but I'm certainly not opposed to any order involving those 3. As you mentioned, the 4 seed is wide open. I will go with my Wildcats over not my Tar Heels because I'm biased, but I would strongly urge you to consider Tennessee because the way they played the other night and the way their schedule is laid out for them with tier 1 possibilities like every 3 days for the rest of the year, I can easily see them taking the 1 spot if they keep on rolling.
Stalika, let me bring you in here. Let's start with that bottom question there. We had Arizona and North Carolina up on the screen also. Now, how about Arizona or Tennessee? And maybe Tennessee is that 4th team.
I think the good news for Tennessee is they really don't have any bad losses. I think the only caveat for the Volunteers is their tier 1 record isn't going to be quite as good as where Arizona and North Carolina are. So that's probably why I would be comfortable with having the Vols as number 6 overall. And even though they did get a nice win at home against Auburn, I don't think that really changes the equation per se, but I would probably give Arizona the slightest of edges for now just because of the road wins against teams like Duke and, well, I'm not sure Colorado should really be a 1A, but that is what the net is, and I am going to go with that for now.
It barely is, but it is one. I guess the thing here, to Tell's point, Tennessee, if they win these last three, will have that same vibe in tier one, Joby, as these other two teams
Yeah.
do, and without as bad of losses.
Yeah, and here's the thing is the Auburn win last night, it's so tight among these three teams that we're discussing, just like it's tight among the top three, I might add. It's even tighter there. Tennessee, with the win over Auburn, did jump 2 spots ahead of Arizona and North Carolina to nab the last 1 seed in the JMT. That changes by the day because Tennessee could easily lose one. North Carolina, they're not up, but the schedule, we all know what they end with, Duke, and so and Arizona can't mess up with their schedule. That's really where it is. Arizona's got to win out, probably even the tournament, Pac-12 tournament, if Tennessee or North Carolina win their tournaments and win probably 2 of the final 3 games in their regular seasons, at least. Probably all 3 for Carolina, but Tennessee probably could get away with 2 of 3.
Let's ask the other question real quick here, Matt. On the other 3 teams, Purdue, UConn, Houston, the order is important, especially on these top 4 lines here, the top 16 teams we call the protected seeds. Is that order right? Purdue, UConn, Houston?
Yes, although I think Houston has started to make it a 3-way talk and not a 2-way talk. But it's still correct as of now. But if Houston wins out in the Big 12 play, especially I think UConn's got a very tough Big East schedule still left. So I think that might be where they might be able to flip over UConn if Houston finishes strong down the stretch here in Big 12 play. That's a fairly manageable schedule by Big 12 standards.
Yeah, just Kansas at home and a road trip to Oklahoma. No, pizza cake. Although, on the other hand, UConn has a road trip to Marquette coming up. They'd like to stop their 21-game losing streak on the road against ranked teams for the UConn Huskies, going back over multiple seasons, by the way.
And that
amazing streak there for UConn with 2 national titles since they last won a road game against a ranked team.
They won a neutral site game against the team.
Okay. Well, I'm talking true road game.
Now listen, Providence not ranked, but that's a big rivalry, at least on the Providence end, and Providence might be playing for their tournament lives.
Mike, give you one last moment here. Is this right then? Purdue, UConn, Houston, Arizona in this order?
Yes, it is, and I can see when I do check Tennessee's remaining schedule, it's not Arizona or North Carolina's fault, but I just think Tennessee has the most potential. I mean, just at Alabama, at South Carolina, Kentucky. If Tennessee wins out, I think they could leapfrog over Arizona or North Carolina for that final number 1 seed.
All right, let's go on to the 2 line then. And Stalika, I'm going to go to you next here. We do have North Carolina, Tennessee. I assume they're going to probably be in the 5 and the 6 spots for you, but I'll let you go. Any 4 teams you like.
Yeah, potential would be correct, but if we're talking about this particular checkpoint, I would have no problem with Arizona being the last of the ones. So, yes, I'm going to go ahead and have North Carolina and Tennessee in that order as my top number 2 seeds. I'm going to have Marquette as my next number 2. And here's where we start to get into a little bit of an interesting question. I'm going to go for a Big 12 team, but do we go Kansas, who has not as good of a record as Iowa State, but they do have a slightly better road record? Let me double check. I am going to stick with Kansas here, but this is easily debatable here.
331 out of conference for Iowa State versus Kansas is very powerful. Enough said for me.
Okay. So Joby, do you agree with these 4 teams then?
I do. I agree with the order. Excellent job, Stalika. But yeah, like I said, Iowa State. I like Iowa State. They've done well in Big 12, but man, that out of conference is just. You don't get the benefit of the doubt when it's even close to a coin flip. And so I'm with Stalika 100% on Kansas there.
Titel, what do you think?
I'm not 100% on anything, Joby. I think
Uh-huh.
that I would go with this, but I think he's right to say that the Hilton Magic is under consideration, and I think we could even discuss the Tide. Like, believe me, when they were down 14 points on the road yesterday after 14 minutes, I was ready to give up on them, but they came all the way back and won by more than 14. So they got something good going on in Tuscaloosa.
I mean, I think we're kind of cruising along here. We seem to be unanimous on the one and the two lines. I'm not hearing much in terms of complaints
Can I
about
say
it.
something, Chad? One
Yeah,
more thing.
go ahead,
Chad?
Mike.
Yeah, I was contemplating for the last number 2 seed, but Kansas, they still have wins over 2 number one seeds, and that still counts.
Yeah. I mean, you look at that. They did beat Houston and UConn and Tennessee. They beat three teams that are in above them on this list here, which is uh, insane. But so, Mike, why don't you go ahead and give me the next four teams up, though? Your three line.
Okay, hang on here. Nuts. Let's see. I will go with Iowa State,
Okay.
right? Alabama, Baylor, and San Diego State.
San Diego State is the fourth one. I got to go to Joby on this because he's already
No.
laughing.
No.
Okay.
San Diego State's a good debate for the 4 line. A good debate. I'm not even saying they're set on the 4 line. San
Hey,
Diego
guys, we
State has
can
not
start
played
in
as
about
well
5
lately.
minutes. Is that all right?
They
I'm
haven't played as
sorry.
well.
Joby, there's a noise in my ears here. I'm sorry.
I will say this: if Auburn had won last night, I would. Or no, Auburn did win. I was considering Auburn. They were another candidate too. But if they'd beaten Tennessee, then I definitely would have had Auburn in the 3 line.
I think the committee will respect San Diego State a lot more than I do. Oh, shocker. But and I'm not saying San Diego State's not worthy of being considered for the 4 line. But no, there are several teams. Auburn, you mentioned Auburn in that mix. Duke should be mentioned here as well as Creighton, going back to the Big East. There are a lot of teams that place clearly, in my view, ahead of San Diego State, and I'd even listen to strong arguments for Illinois and Kentucky.
Okay. So Joby just gave us about 5 seed lines worth of teams here. So let's kind of break this down
And
a little bit.
that's why San Diego State should not be here. There's a lot of teams that
Let's
are
get a
Okay.
couple thoughts
So
here.
it seems
Matt,
like we bumped San Diego State down to the 4.
yeah, Matt, it seems, Matt, do you agree with Joby San Diego State going? And if so, who of this whole list would come up in their place?
Yes, I do. I think San Diego State's a solid 4, but 3 is a little rich still. There I have Duke, but it's Duke and Creighton are really close for me. But it's almost like Duke was a little more impressive in their loss last weekend, and so that slightly edged them. Because I mean, Duke was very competitive in that Wake game, and Creighton got basically blown off the floor by St. John's. And I think Wake and St. John's are very similar teams.
We have unfortunately David Griggs with us.
yeah,
I give you a minute.
I need a few minutes before we get started. I don't. Why are we starting at 11 and why is everybody 45 minutes early? You told
Griggs.
me you were very specific. Don't join us
Griggs.
until 11.
Okay, Griggs, are you going to talk to us about the 3 line, or you gonna ramble on?
Believe it or not, and I thought we would have to start completely over, but the top 2 lines match my top 2 lines, so I guess that's acceptable. And the 3 we have out there are on my 3 line, minus the team I have here is Duke, and I think that we had what was the other team, like Duke and San Diego State, or was it Duke and Creighton?
Duke and Creighton is our current debate now. Yes.
Okay, yeah. If we put those side by side, which they are, I think Duke tops out a little higher, although they're both pretty consistent. I like what Duke's done on the road. I just like Duke a little bit more. They're both basically identical. I don't know really what tips it, other than it's just I think the road neutral's a little better.
Now, one thing I could say as far as Creighton having a slight edge, they're a little more heavier on tiers 1 and 2.
They
Duke
are.
has a lot of tier 3 wins if you wanted to split hairs right here.
And they did win at Nebraska. Not many teams can say that. If I had you know, if I wanted to replace San Diego State, I would lean toward Creighton. I mean, they do have the home win over UConn, home win over Alabama. Those are, you know, those are top-notch teams. And then at Nebraska, I mean, that's a lot because it's hard to win there.
I actually have them
can't
right
forgive
next
them-
to each other. So
I
like
can't
it's
forgive them for
yeah.
giving the Mountain West half their tournament out of conference tournament wins.
All right,
Oh,
we
it always
got to
comes
make
down
it.
to the Mountain West, Joby.
I'm gonna let go to Tytel to be our tiebreaker here on this. Is it Duke or is it Creighton, or do you want to go somewhere else and make me cast the tie-breaking vote?
Today it's Duke. I suggest you wait 48 hours because if Creighton beats Marquette and Duke loses to Carolina, this is a completely different discussion, right?
It is.
But today it's Duke. To answer your
Today-
question.
Well, 48 hours, Duke is playing Virginia.
It's Duke, Virginia this week. Duke, North Carolina will be next weekend.
Fine. If Duke
Yeah.
loses to Virginia and Creighton beats
Yes.
Marquette, can we all agree that Creighton should be above Duke?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, absolutely.
I mean, I have them right next to each other now. So I mean, it's basically a coin flip.
All right, we got 5 teams still under consideration here. Joby, I'm going to go to you for the 4 line.
I mean, you know the odd man, you know the one that's not like the other for me.
Well, give me an
I
order
really
at
do it
least.
Creighton. I mean, seriously, Creighton, Auburn. I'm going Illinois, though. Illinois, Kentucky, San Diego State are very close, and you know I'm going to side against the Mountain West school when I can, but I will hear arguments for that, and certainly can be overridden for Illinois and Kentucky. The other two, I legitimately think, both the committee and me personally, legitimately think the other two are ahead by by.
I have no problem with Creighton, Auburn, Illinois. Those are solid teams for the 4 line.
Well, maybe the debate now is Kentucky versus San Diego State.
Oh, there's no debate.
Tytel, let me go back over to you here because I mean Kentucky is just coming off of wins over Alabama and Auburn and at Mississippi State. They just picked up 3 quad 1A wins in the last week and a half here.
And we here at Hoops HD do love quad 1A wins. I agree, Chad. But the X factor for, I think San Diego State is better today. The good news for them is in a normal year, they play a bunch of crappy teams in the Mountain West tournament. This year, they might play nothing but tournament teams on the board. Regardless, I think that Kentucky's biggest argument is actually injuries. I know Chad loves asterisk games, but they lost to Kansas without Bradshaw. They lost at A&M without Fierro. They lost to Florida without Edwards and Wagner. They lost to Tennessee without Wagner. They lost to UNCW without Wagner. When healthy, this team is clearly a top 4 seed team, but they're never healthy, although they're getting there. So I think that if I had to pick today, I'd go Aztecs, but I could easily be talked to Kentucky.
Well, can I try and easily talk you into it?
Please.
Okay, Kentucky tops out not just higher, but much higher. They have multiple wins away from home against teams that are already in or that are going to be protected seeds. Kentucky is better on the road. Kentucky's better road neutral. Kentucky's strength of record is better. Kentucky's J&G, albeit they're one in the same, is better. I mean, I just think Kentucky is better by just about every measurement. Other than they do have a loss that smells a lot worse than anything the Aztecs have. I don't want to completely ignore that, but even taking that into account, at Auburn, at Mississippi State, North Carolina neutral, at Florida, who's very good at home, that's a great profile.
And the eye test, I know we don't get into it. Kentucky is one of those teams that really pops to me. It's precisely what people are talking about of how they look right now. Like, this is a team that could, it's what Cal sometimes does. He gets teams, they've learned the defense, they're going. Yeah. If you're going off eye test, which I think there is some element when we do this, Kentucky's really, they're 4 with a bullet in the old Billboard Hot 100 day terminology.
Real quick, it sounds like Kentucky is going to be the team here over San Diego State. I'm seeing a little more love for them, but real quick, Sleeka, any problems with the other 3 there? Creighton, Auburn, and Illinois.
I would not have any problems with those 3 teams right there. And the only other team I would probably throw in the mix at this point would be Clemson.
I'll throw Clemson there
Yes.
under consideration, but let's move on to the 5 line. And Matt, I'm going to go to you for the next 4 teams up here. Clemson and San Diego State both under consideration.
Yeah, but I would throw San Diego State and Clemson as the first two, and then we're gonna get a little more interesting. But we got to start filling some teams in. And my next two are actually BYU and Dayton.
Interesting. Let's start with BYU real quick because I'm kind of with you following that win at Kansas. I think this team went flying up. I think
Yeah.
every seed list out there. Mike, your thoughts?
That I don't know what you call that's a definitely moves the arrow type of deal before to win at Kansas. And if you look at the other candidates, it's slim pickings for the 5 seed. Like you have a lot of teams that are more worth the 6 or 7 seed. The 5, it's like after Clemson and San Diego State, it's like we're starting to scrape here. Dayton, it's like, but I think BYU now with the win at Kansas, they're definitely a worthy 5 seed.
And Griggs, I know you've got a comment on Dayton that you don't
Well,
think they're here.
Well, okay, when you look at Dayton, my problem with them is that they're just not good. Their paper isn't good for starters. So when we dive into their paper, they've beaten no one that we're going to select. I don't think. Maybe we'll select the Johnnies. And while they've avoided bad losses for the most part, they've also lost to teams outside the field. I'm not saying that Dayton shouldn't be selected. I'm not saying they shouldn't be inside the bubble and in on the first ballot, but the 5 line is crazy. I say that realizing a lot of people have them here, not just our group, but when you, oh my God. Okay. That's another reason I want them out of the field. Okay, so that's the paper part. But let's look at some of these scores. Have you watched them? They're not
They
that
struggled
good.
against Fordham, didn't they?
Yeah, they struggled against a lot of teams. Like they barely beat UMass. They just don't look that
Can
good.
I please be the 12 seed that plays in and plays them as a 5?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Dave's a 5. It's like I'd love to be
Right,
the 12
and
seed.
I
Well,
know
I'll tell you what,
I know
Griggs,
that it's
Griggs,
the paper
It's
isn't
who you
good,
go
but when you
to. It's
watch them, they
in-
don't
it's
pass
not
the eye test
Dayton's
either.
in.
Yes, Chad, I'm listening. What's the question?
Give me a team to replace them with if you want to say
Yeah.
they don't belong there. Give me your next
South
team.
Carolina
Okay. So
or
move it up.
BYU. Oh, you
Well,
already have them
BYU
there.
already got in. We already got BYU.
Who
So
do we
let's
not?
pull-
Do we
let's
have
pull
Auburn and
BYU.
Clemson? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's pull Dayton up against South Carolina. Let me go to somebody else here. Let me go to Titel. Is Griggs right? Should Dayton be down a little bit lower, and maybe South Carolina offer that nice win at A&M, albeit A&M is probably not going to be in this field. Should they be up here?
They should be under consideration, but I still have Dayton. South Carolina has a Tennessee-like schedule, ironically including Tennessee, where if they win out, they could just keep picking up tier 1 wins every single 3 or 4 days the rest of the month of March. That being said, the non-conference strength of schedule is atrocious, and I think Dayton will maybe win out. And you look at Dayton's losses, nothing as bad as the 2 tier 3s on the left. And the loss to Houston was bad. The other 4 were by 5 or less. And Chad, I believe it was you who said that great teams only lose games that are close, right?
A little bit backwards.
Well, okay. Let's do the reverse. I've made the case against Dayton. Someone make the case for them. Like, why should Dayton be ahead of South Carolina or
Matt,
St. Mary's or
okay.
Wisconsin
Matt, they
or
were your
Nevada or
pick.
Texas or TCU? What makes people think that they're better than them?
I mean, the resume metrics are excellent. Their predictives are decent. I mean, the overall rating is 20. Where I have them in 20. I mean, it's and
That's the
everyone
OAR. That's the OAR. That's an average of all the resume and predictive metrics on the screen. That they'd rate 20th in the nation on that. I'm not really hearing enough love to pull them off this line here, Griggs. I think you've lost the battle.
Well, I mean, it's hard being as smart as me and being the only one that's right. I mean, it's just difficult.
Well, unfortunately, just for that, I might just skip you, but it is your turn, so I'm going to let you give the next 6 teams. The next 4 teams up for the 6th line.
Okay, well, because you told me we were starting at 11, and it's as if you didn't want me on the show. I'm starting to think you're trying to avoid me. Is Auburn is okay. I'm just trying to update my notes, and this is harder than you think when you don't have any arms.
And no brains.
Oh,
Personal
oh.
foul.
Was that really necessary?
It's
15
not
yards
no
on John
brains,
Felicio.
John. It's a smaller brain.
Greg, you want to give me 4 teams, or should we pass and go? to
South
the-
Carolina,
Okay.
who's already on the board. I know that this is high, but I really like them, and I certainly like them more than Dayton. The Gales, I have
Okay.
them way up here. Nose diving, I could listen to arguments that they should be lower. Wisconsin,
I've got
And-
no problem with
Why
anything you've said
Wisconsin?
so
It-
far. but-
because I want to make Joby mad. I've got Nevada.
Whoa.
I have
Rob-
4
Rob-
Mountain West teams I would have taken ahead of that. Man, 3. I hate New Mexico. 3.
Yeah, and let's move on to the 7 line since this one is indestructible.
Yeah, Utah State and Colorado State still on the not selected. yet.
Okay. Let's get some thoughts on this here. Let me start with Titel. Let me start with you on this one here. South Carolina, St. Mary's, Wisconsin, Nevada. Did Griggs get any of them correct?
He got the first 3 right. I was with him the whole way, and then he
I
decided
was
to
too,
lay this
actually.
egg with the team from Reno. So get them the hell out of there, please. I think that I would go with the Cougars. If you're sweeping a number 1 seed, which I don't think anybody else in the nation has done, you impress the hell out of me.
Yeah, and Joby, you're nodding your head. Is that the move that should have
Yeah,
been here? Is Washington
that's the
stay in the
team.
6th line, not
Yeah.
That's
Nevada?
the team. I agree 100%, John. It's tough because, they do the split. Bobby Hurley got his pound of flesh. But this is where my belief structure is. I think after winning Arizona, they were on the 5 line and they fell back to the 6 as opposed to, 6 was as high as they go. No, they were punished. And I think they were an 8, went to all the way to a 5, slipped back to a 6 in the end of the 6 line. Perfect spot for him. I think this.
Chet, can we pull up Nevada's?
Or the top of the 6 and the bottom of the 6? Like maybe they were the top of the 6.
Yeah. I think they would have been ahead of Dayton, and be very truthful. They would, if they don't lose that Arizona State game. I think, at least in our bracket, and I think the committee, I think
Yeah.
along the lines, I think they'd be ahead of Dayton.
Yeah, well, in looking at this profile, I want to point out like that you see where it says like right under their name, the Mountain West. I mean, that seals it.
Okay. I think this will be the
They
last we're going to hear from the
one
puppet the rest of the
4
show.
tournament wins. with TCU.
Why is it that the Mountain West always has good numbers, even though the
Oh, it's just it's a phenomenal league. I mean,
Well,
Do you not watch our shows, Mike?
They gave
Watch
us
Joby for
Fast
5
forward till
minutes.
You see me start to talk on final thought, and you're good. You'll learn.
they game the system, blah blah blah.
Let's I think
I like Washington State. I do. In all seriousness, I like Wazoo. I had them 25th
Oh, yeah.
instead of 24th.
You beat
but
Arizona
they are
twice, that's
good.
for
Yeah.
Let me go real quick here over to Matt. Just the other 3 teams: South Carolina, St. Mary's, Wisconsin. Did Griggs actually get those right?
Yeah, no, he was off to a surprisingly great start, and then it turned team 24. We just went off the cliff, and it's thankfully we presented a pretty good option instead. I mean, if we're talking about West, I would have said Utah State is an option too, but like that and
wait.
Washington is 24 and 25. So
I didn't
okay.
realize Utah State wasn't already in.
Okay, Griggs.
well,
I'm
we
gonna
gotta
be
move them up.
muting you
We
here in a
gotta
minute.
move
If this
them
doesn't-
up. We
Griggs is trying to make up for missing the first 10 minutes of the show by dominating the rest of it.
Did you
So
think
let
Utah
me,
State was a 2 seed? I mean, come on, man.
let's go to the 7 line. Titel, it's up to you again. Give me the next 4 teams up.
I'm going to do 2 Mountain West teams not named Nevada in
Yes.
Utah State and Colorado State. I'm going to do an SEC team named Florida. And I'm going to do some Texas Tech action out of Lubbock, despite the fact that they did not have their best week this week.
You have one team here that I honestly don't agree with. I know Joby won't either. Colorado State, Titel. This team is going so far in the wrong direction lately on this 3-game losing streak. Losses at home to Nevada, loss at UNLV. Let me get another opinion here. Not Joby, I'm not getting yours because I know where yours is, but maybe over to Matt. Is Colorado State still up in the top half of the bracket at this point, even at 8-8 in the Mountain West now?
I have them on the 8 line.
Okay.
No, put it this way. My alternative, this is a good time if we have Griggs muted, because my alternative here is actually Mississippi State.
Well, we know Griggs is gonna have a problem with that, so glad he's muted. But Salika, what do
Is
you?
this thing on? Okay.
Uh, let me go to Salika here. What do you think about Title's 4 teams? Utah State, Colorado State, Florida, Texas Tech.
I think he was going in the right direction as far as getting a Mountain West team in here, but honestly, I could have probably made the Nevada case a lot more than I would for Colorado State. I mean, Colorado State, yes, they did have the nice neutral court win against Creighton, but they haven't really done very much since that time. And in fact, I only think I'm not even sure they have any wins that are like outside of the top two tiers outside of the Mountain West, and unless you want to consider Colorado and BC, I mean, yes, it's nice you got a decent win in the Front Range, but I can't really consider that. You look at what Utah State has done. Yes, they're going to be tier 2 heavy, which I think is going to be one of Joby's arguments against them. But I think if we're looking at other teams that could potentially get into the 7-line territory, what about Oklahoma?
I'll put Oklahoma under consideration here, but let me ask one more question. Nevada and Colorado State, I've got them on the screen. Nevada's 3 games up on Colorado in the conference standings. Does that not
And
maybe mean Griggs was right that Nevada comes in before
They
them?
swept Colorado State,
and
didn't
they swept them too, head to head.
Which I agree, head to head is important. Again, I kind of am leaning towards non-conference strength of schedule, but I'm
Right.
one man, so if everybody else wants to go with them, I'm not going to veto.
Okay. Let's get a couple of opinions here.
I like Nevada over Colorado State, to be honest. I mean,
I
swept
like a
Colorado
third
State, the
Mountain
neutral
West
court win
team
over
better than
TCU,
both of
at
them.
Utah State, road win at Utah State.
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems like we're going to be pulling Colorado State off of here. The question might be, is it Nevada or maybe it is Oklahoma, who is Salika's pick here? Joby, should it maybe be Oklahoma here over Nevada? I shouldn't have asked you, should I? Over
Well,
Nevada.
obviously, no, I'm going to follow up with what I said before. And while I don't think this is the team that comes here, I honestly, truly do believe Nevada and both Nevada and Colorado State are below another Mountain West team. I really do think Boise's ahead of them. I don't think Boise.
I
belongs.
like Boise a lot too.
But Oklahoma, the problem with Oklahoma is the recency bias component, without a doubt. They just didn't look good against Iowa State. But a lot of teams don't look good against Iowa State, and they had to go to overtime in Bedlam. But Bedlam might be a little different. It's like, so they won the game. Good teams win games, close games, as Chad points out. So I would go Oklahoma. If they lost Bedlam, we would not be discussing them for 2 lines, though.
What about? I'm kind of curious, just to kind of throw another team out there. I'm not advocating for them just yet. It just feels like this is about where they should be. What about the Horns, the Longhorns?
I'll
At
throw
7?
I'll throw Texas up on the board here as well. Matt, let me ask you. Oklahoma, Texas, Nevada. Who should be our 4th team joining Utah State, Florida, Texas Tech?
Of those 3, Oklahoma. I'm not real enthusiastic about any of them, but yeah.
Did you have a different team that we think we're
Yeah,
missing
I
here?
had Mississippi State.
No.
Like I said, you were muted when I suggested that, but yeah.
Mississippi State, fresh off of a loss to Kentucky, so I don't know. Had they won that game, which is a close game, Matt, I think I might be with you here. That's
Well, the
And I
one
like
thing
that
Mississippi.
third against the road wins.
Yeah.
Not a ton, but still, like I said, they're 8-6 road neutral. So like,
Well, one of the things they've done better than a lot of the teams that we're looking at in this range is that when they've gone on the road, they've made the fans happy.
okay. I'll tell you what, we do need to move on here. We have a lot of teams that have been mentioned, including Nevada, Oklahoma, Texas, Mississippi State, Boise State, Colorado State. The most love I've heard is for Oklahoma. I'm going to make the tiebreaker
God.
call here. Put the Sooners in the 7 line. Let's move on to the 8 line. Salika, give me your next 4 teams up, and we do have 5 teams under consideration that you can throw up there.
I think this is the time we're gonna go let's get Nevada up here right now.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead and get Texas up here because I think they've got enough tier one wins that we need to start mentioning them. But if we're looking at another team that's starting to pile up some tier ones, let's also get TCU up here. They have not been mentioned yet. And I think it's a little bit early to mention Florida Atlantic because they've been rather flaky of late.
Of
I'm gonna-
late.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with another team that's under consideration and get Boise State on my 8 line here.
So pushing Colorado State down another line. I was kind of advocating for one line down, but now we're pushing them down 2 lines. But Joby, what do you think?
I actually will accept Boise here. You
Okay.
know, my target's Nevada. The team that I would like to see on this line instead is a team that has beaten our #1 overall seed, Northwestern.
I think that is a team that we haven't mentioned.
I
That's,
was going to
that's
say, if
probably
you said
worth-
Ohio State, I'm leaving.
Mhm.
Kyle Lamb would be doing backflips. Come on.
Mike, you're a Big Ten guy. Should Northwestern be in over Nevada or one of these other
It's not
teams?
a bad
perhaps?
pick because especially they won at Maryland, and you might at first you might think, oh, Maryland, that's not a big deal, but that's a road win, something Northwestern needed, and technically beating Maryland over there is a tier 1 win. So I don't have a problem with Northwestern being on the 8 line, at worst 9.
I had him on the 9. I just think all of you value road wins way too much.
Okay, hold on a second. Mike, would it be
Oh,
over
you
Nevada? Mike, would
Oh.
would Northwestern be over Nevada or one of the other 3 teams? Texas. TCU?
Kidding, Mike. Kidding.
Yeah. I'd have Northwestern over Boise State.
Boise State. Okay, so we'll pull out one of the Mountain West teams in favor of Northwestern.
And the
Titel,
reason why, Chad, I choose Boise over Nevada is because Boise has a share of the conference lead, and that's a big deal. If they have a chance to actually win the conference, that's that says a lot.
Yeah, I said Nevada with the sole intention of making Joby's head explode.
Okay. So, Griggs, I'm going to mute you again because you're not being productive to the show here. And Titel, what do you think? Is Northwestern belong here over a Nevada or a Boise State?
Yes, but not over Colorado State. I can't believe we're dropping them to 9. They've been a top 7 seed the whole season. I understand they're going in the wrong direction, but I think you're dropping them way too far.
So should we drop both Nevada and Boise State and put Colorado State and Northwestern in then?
No, Chad, we should drop Texas because they're having a good season and losing to a bunch of great Big 12 teams, but they are losing also to teams like UCF and West Virginia, I believe.
Good
Okay,
point.
so let's assuming we drop down Nevada and put in, let's make that move right now. Drop down Nevada and put in Northwestern. So the next kind of question we have here is whether or not Texas should be out in favor of Colorado State. So let me get, Matt, your opinion on that one.
I have yes on that. The one thing Texas still better 9 and 10 against the top 3 tiers. That's still
Bad. That's
I
bad.
have him in the field, but man, not quite yet. Like I probably have him actually as a 9 seed, but still, we got to I think temper their climb till we get that number above 500. Not just that. I think about like
Can I try and be actually productive here in looking at Texas? You mentioned the 9 and 10 record, but how many of 1, 2, 3, 4 of those 10 are away from home against the top 2 lines? Teams on the 1 line might lose 3 out of those.
Okay, Griggs, 4 of those 9 wins are at home against things like Greensboro and West Virginia and Kansas State and neutral court
but
LSU.
other wins
so
are-
that balances out, does it not?
I just think you got to take into account that a lot of people, that's if you're going to say 10 losses, that is 4 of those are losses that virtually everyone, including the 1 seeds, would have.
Okay, there's still 6 more losses. Stalika,
Okay,
real
so
quick,
it's 9 and 6.
Stalika, real quick. Colorado State in Texas on down the line.
I can live with Colorado State being down to the 9 line just because they've been on too much of a slide right here.
Oh, so you would be with Griggs. That means I'm gonna have to cast the tiebreaker vote. I'm going with Titel. We're going Colorado State here, along with Northwestern, TCU, Boise. FAU was mentioned, along with Nevada, Texas, Mississippi State. Dropping down onto the 9 line, which Mike, you are up for the 9 line. So give me your next 4 teams. We do have 4 under consideration, but you may go wherever you like.
Okay, Nevada, Florida Atlantic, I like. Texas, I'm good with the 9 line. Let's see, Mississippi State. And we'll go with Mississippi State.
All right, we're going the 4 under considerations. Let's see here. Salika, do you like that?
I would probably have liked Mississippi State a little bit more had they been able to beat Kentucky. Yes, I know I'm probably going to get a little flack for not piling on them a little more as far as their lack of true road wins, but at some point you got to give Mississippi State credit when you consider that some of their neutral court wins are against Washington State and Northwestern teams. I might add they're already in the field, and also the Tennessee and Auburn wins are very respectable. And plus, when you start to consider some of the alternatives, are you really ready to add Seton Hall, Providence, and Nebraska yet? I don't think so.
I think that's the biggest argument in favor of this slide here is you look at what's left after this. It is teams like Seton Hall, Nebraska, and Providence. Joby,
Virginia Tech,
Syracuse. I'll put Virginia there too, Joby. What do you think? What do you think of these 4 teams here, Joby?
That's a good, especially with Nebraska's loss tonight. There'd be a strong argument if Nebraska hadn't lost tonight, but I think this is a good group. Florida Atlantic is actually the one that gives me a little pause. And the reason why is they have the great win. Hey, yeah, they have a great win against Titel's team. Yeah, all right. Besides that, they got nothing else of note. And they have some bad along with it. They have some really bad along with it. It's not like, oh, you lost, like when we were looking at, we were looking at SEC team. Oh, they lost to LSU at home, and that's not great. No, they lost to Bryant, and I know injuries, but Bryant and Florida Gulf Coast, I don't care if their entire starting lineup is hurt. They shouldn't be losing those games. And they got Arizona. A&M's out now. Virginia Tech is not in. St. Bonnie's aren't in. Butler's on. A&M and Butler are trying to compete on who can be worse right now. Loyola Chicago is weirdly in position in the A-10, but they're not really an at-large. And SMU isn't much at home. So they really don't have, their metrics say they have 6 tier 2 wins, but they aren't really great tier 2 wins. It's Arizona and not a lot else.
They are NIT-ish, but I will say at least they're on neutral courts. They weren't at home. Yeah. I do give them some points for that.
And I'm not saying definitively remove. What I'm saying is we have to really watch this team. This team is teeter a little bit. I mean, they lose not to Memphis. That doesn't eliminate them, though. It does make them probably first 4 bound. They lose one of the next 2, including at North Texas, who could beat them. I all of a sudden start going, does this team belong in? Over a St. John's, over a Wake, the teams that we'll get to. I got real questions at that point.
Joby, that is an excellent assessment. And the other thing about them is, I don't know if flaky's the right word, but you just don't. This team has been hard to place for a while. And when you watch them, you just don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they're one of those teams that might end up in the first 4 and then go all the way to the final 4.
Well, I think we've got our 9 line. So let's move on to the 10. And Matt, let me go to you for the next 4 teams up here. We do have 4 teams under consideration again. But I don't know if you want to go with any of them or somewhere else.
Definitely Nebraska. And then, oh man, this is where we're having to go on a touch of a limb, but that's where I got New Mexico now, because I've always been a little bit higher on them in that, but now I had to drive them down to the 10 line. And I don't love this either, but Michigan State. And then I have Seton Hall at the bottom of the line.
Titel, what do you think about Nebraska, New Mexico, Michigan State, and Seton Hall coming in here?
It's getting to hold your nose territory, but these seem to be the best of the odorific group. My Seton Hall note is that I'll defer to Matt on all things Big East, but I assume when Seton Hall has Kadari Richmond and can beat teams like UConn and Marquette, they are a top 10 seed. And when they don't have them and lose to teams like Providence and Marquette, ironically, they're not. And then I'll defer to Joby. Is Virginia a 10 seed or an 11 seed?
With New Mexico listed there, I'm not just saying this with the Mountain West, but I'm looking at the out of conference schedule and the lack of doing anything out of conference whatsoever. And not even an attempt to. Oh, but they had a home and home with, the Aggies, New Mexico State Aggies, not Texas A&M. I'm not there with New Mexico. I'm not playing the Mountain West shtick. I really am not there over Virginia. Virginia would score 40 and New Mexico would score 19 in a game when they play, but that would still be a 20-point win for Virginia.
I'm actually with Joby on this one.
Yeah.
I kind of am also get one more opinion here. Mike, what do you think? Should we make the Virginia New Mexico swap?
Yeah, and Virginia would not lose at home to Air Force either. So if I had to pick between those two teams, I would pick Virginia.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to put Virginia in. We're going to take New Mexico out. Griggs, you had another problem with this line, or are we okay?
Not a problem with the line. There's another team that I like, but maybe I'll bust them out if they're not mentioned in the next line.
Well, I'll tell you what. We are going to the 11 line. We're getting close to the first four, but Joby, you're up. Give me just four teams now. Next four.
I'll start Providence. Let's start off with Providence. I think they're clearly the next team in my book. Then I'm going to go with flavors of the week. And I'm there. I think these two teams are playing this eye test and what they've done recently. I like Wake. I like St. John's here. And then let's see tonight. Let's see how the Zags do. I'm assuming the Zags will beat the Dons.
Yeah, I was going to say Gonzaga.
And if that happens, then I'm going to, I have a right to pull back if they lose tonight, obviously. But for now, I will put Gonzaga in.
Okay, real quick note here. It's about a little before 11 p.m. right now. Any games that go final after we're done obviously aren't factored in, which include Washington State's playing right now. St. Mary's and Gonzaga are both playing this evening as well. Forgot to mention that at the top of the show. But let me get a few opinions on this. Salika, let me start with you. What are your opinion on these four teams here?
I would not agree with Wake after what they did at Notre Dame. They may have put themselves back on the wrong side of the bubble. I mean, yes, they did check off a box after they were able to get a protected seed win against Duke. However, I think based on what I've seen from the Florida Atlantic profile, I think there is another team out of the American we may have buried a little prematurely. And as much as I hate to do this, pull up the Memphis Tigers, please.
Okay. All right. Hold on one second. Okay. Let's go. Let's say we'll hold off New Mexico again for a moment here. Let's discuss Wake Forest and let's discuss them against Memphis here. And Matt, let me ask you, Wake Forest, they did just lose at Notre Dame. Memphis, 3-game winning streak.
Yeah, though Wake Forest hasn't lost to Rice at home, though.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chad, can
It's
I pull
only
out
one tier 4 loss.
Sleek, I think you've been better if you argued back for that New Mexico team that we haven't put in yet over Wake Forest.
Chad, can I pull out my team now?
Go ahead.
Can we put Wake and Pitt side by side?
Okay. How about Pittsburgh? Go ahead, Griggs. Make your case on Pittsburgh.
Okay, well, Wake's big win was at home against Duke. Pitt won at Duke. Pitt won at Virginia, who was in this range. Wake didn't beat anybody else on the road other than Boston College, who probably won't even be in the AC8.
Okay, let me ask
yeah.
a Titel question. Maybe that's this question to Titel. Duke lost at home to Pittsburgh. It's a double asterisk loss because they're missing two of their best players. Isn't it also a double asterisk win for Pittsburgh?
Nailed it.
It is, but do you still value beating Duke at home more than beating Duke on the road, even without
I think I do value beating a full strength Duke team at home versus Duke missing two of their top players on the road. Joby, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and this is pure eye test. As someone who's played both teams recently and in Charlottesville, Wake's a better team than Pitt. They really are. Even though Pitt won in Charlottesville, Pitt nailed every three you could possibly imagine. It was one of those hot nights that you see, and good for Pitt. Good win. I mean, Pitt should certainly be on our under the consideration board, no doubt. But this Wake team is good. That was just a letdown at Notre Dame. It was after the big Duke win. Everybody was on top of Wake. Wake was evil because they hurt Kyle Filipowski. They sent him to the hospital. And I mean, there was so much distraction around that next game. Of course, they're going to be flat the next one, but they are playing well. They scare me. This team, you put them, I think, where they would wind up is in Dayton right now. And if they were in Dayton, I could see them get 2 wins and be that team out of Dayton that goes away because they have balance, man. They are playing better than they were earlier in the season, earlier in the conference season. They are good.
Yeah, and I mean they're in the same conference, so there's a lot of things to consider. And as we finish up, maybe it'll sort itself up. Can we go back to the profiles, Chad? I mean, the other thing that makes me hold my nose at Wake about Wake, and I won't even say it because all of you know what it is. The 2-8 road record.
2-8. Okay.
And the best one is the best one is Boston College. You can't beat anybody on the road that's better than Boston College.
Let's try to get some decisions here. Titel, are these 4 teams correct, or should Wake or maybe one of the others be coming out in favor of some we have under consideration, like New Mexico?
I would put in New Mexico over St. John's if that's what you're asking.
Over St. John's. Okay.
I would too.
So let's do this. Matt, should it be St. John's out and New Mexico in?
Of this order, I have Wake just 1 spot over St. John. So yeah, if we're in New Mexico, several spots ahead of both.
Okay, so but you like Wake being in here then?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with that. One other team, I like New Mexico in. I think if we're talking a Big East team, we should be talking Villanova personally.
Like them too.
Yeah.
One more win above 500 to make me feel better about Villanova, but I agree, Matt. You gotta watch them. I just wanted to win.
They probably gotta win 2 out of 3.
They gotta, because I just 16 and 12 just is that little stink.
Yeah.
5 above.
But look at
and I
Villanova's
am
top 3
100%
wins.
on
They're
board.
very good wins, and they're all road neutral wins.
And Chad, the order will matter here of what we put. 2, most likely 2. I haven't done the math completely, but 2 teams are going to avoid Dayton. 2 will be going there, depending
Right. So,
how we do things.
so are we okay with this order then? Let me go to Stalika. Providence, Wake Forest, New Mexico, Gonzaga in that order for these 4 teams, because as Joey just said, the bottom 2 may be going to Dayton.
I think I would agree with that, but I also want to go back to the Villanova profile for a moment. They'd better win, I think, at least 2 out of the next 3 if they're going to feel safe, and that's going to include 1 on the road. If they lose all 3 of these, there's a good chance they could end up in the 8-9 game in the Big East tournament, and then you're talking about a potential quarterfinal matchup with a UConn. Good luck with that.
Well, the other thing, Stalika, if they lose all 3 of these, they have 15 losses. That would be 16 losses in that large bid. That'll never happen. I don't see that. Let me ask, Griggs, you're up next, but let me ask you a question also here, Griggs,
Sure.
before we go to the next, before I ask you for the next 2 teams. We have an American team in here already in Florida Atlantic. For the sake of this exercise, Griggs, I'm going to let you make the call. Should Florida Atlantic be our automatic bid winner from the American, or should it be South Florida, the current first place team? Because if that's the case, South Florida's got to be on this 11 line here.
I have always done it the way you have, and my answer would be that the team with the best profile is who you are saying is the best and is therefore the auto bid based on them having the best chance to win the conference tournament. I completely understand it's not illogical to do it the other way. If you're asking me how I do it, that's how I do it, but it's a panel. Let's ask the panel.
Okay. Well, anyone else have an opinion here? Because it is a very interesting
We better
question.
mention Richmond. It's the exact same situation.
Yeah, Richmond and South Florida.
Okay, I'll throw them up there. So right now for this exercise, by the way, Richmond and South Florida, unless they get one of these 2 at-large spots, which they're probably not going to happen, may not be in this field, but definitely other people may have them in the field, and we understand that. But Griggs, why don't you give me the next 2 teams up here? Come off of this 16 on the at-large board. or somebody else that we
Okay.
haven't mentioned. If you want, there are a few uh, single
Most,
big
yeah, I,
conferences.
other than Pitt, I'm not a huge fan of really anyone on the board. Uh, I'm not going to help you out too much because my next team is McNeese.
McNeese before Princeton or Indiana State or any of those?
Yes, and
Okay.
then Indiana State's next,
Keep
and
going
then
until you get me to
Villanova,
that large bid.
and
and
then
then Villan-
Villanova.
Okay.
And
So-
finally,
So so those would be our first 14 would be Pittsburgh and Villanova. McNeese and Indiana State would be automatic bid winners and would not be going to the first four. Titel, let me start with you. Pitt and Villanova they've been our last two teams in, or should we have gone Memphis, St. John's, or somewhere else entirely?
We should have gone Richmond, and I can explain why if you'd like. So
I like
Um,
the Spiders.
Go ahead.
Not to interrupt, but yeah.
thank you for not interrupting. So Delani Hunt,
You're
their
welcome.
senior guard, is the reason why. So he broke his wrist in the first half against Colorado and was out for 6 to 8 weeks. And without him, they lost to Colorado and Florida, which are decent losses. And they also lost at Wichita State and at Northern Iowa, which are less than good losses. Since he came back on January 9th, they've gone 12-2, including a home win over Dayton, where he had 10 points and 0 turnovers. This is one of those situations where you have to dig into the injury numbers, which I believe the committee does. When healthy, Delani Hunt helps Richmond become a good enough team. I think they're going to win the auto bid, but if not, I think they're still good enough to win the at-large, maybe.
All right. Joby, what do you think? Should Richmond
I think
be in
Richmond
the-
is closer than what the average person would think, just generically. And I would put Richmond as the auto bid winner ahead of McNeese and Indiana State. But I agree with Griggs in how I do it. I say, oh, Dayton's going to win that. I think Florida Atlantic's going to win that auto bid. And I don't think Richmond's quite there over St. John's or Villanova. I think the choice is which Big East team profile do you like better in this situation? I think it's very fair to say, okay, St. John's versus Villanova, that's your final call.
All right. Let's assume
And I
this is
go
our
the
fi-
Johnnies because of how they're playing right now, and they beat Villanova. But
You're going Johnny's.
totally
Griggs is
cool
going
with
Nova. Let's get a couple quick other opinions here quick. Matt, Johnny's or Nova for our
How
last
about
team
both?
in?
How about both of them in drop Pitt?
Salika, Johnny's, Nova, or both?
I have to go with the season sweep right here. Give me the Johnnies.
Johnny's and Pitt,
Especially
you
after
go.
what they did last night to Butler, because they've effectively knocked the Bulldogs out of the at-large picture.
One more opinion, Mike.
Totally
Johnny's-
agree.
All right.
St. John's is season sweep, and you know they're hot.
Yeah,
They're
St.
surging.
John's gets our final spot. Villanova does not make our field, but I think we have our at-large field now with Memphis, Richmond, Villanova, South Florida being teams that we mentioned that did not get in. Let me fill out the 12 line here real quick here. Princeton and James Madison, JMU team that's maybe not that far off of an at-large bid also. Just felt the job. Before I reveal the rest of them, kind of want to throw the question out there. Is there anybody else that's close that we have not mentioned? Run through kind of each of you here real quickly on it. Sleek, let me start with you. Anybody else besides these four that are under consideration that you feel is really close to an at-large bid?
I think if you were talking about James Madison as an at-large, I think you would have to look at App State as the automatic bid out of the Sun Belt. And even then, we're talking about a team that has already swept James Madison in the regular season.
Right. Okay. App State up there.
What about
Matt,
Grand
anybody-
Canyon?
Grand
Oof.
Canyon actually.
Ooh, sore
well-
subject.
Well, they're going to be on the top of our 13 line actually. So
Okay.
they will be in this field. I just haven't revealed that portion of the bracket yet. They will be right there though. How about Matt? Anyone else that's close that we haven't mentioned?
Colorado.
Yes.
How about Colorado and Utah? Both these Pac-12
Mhm.
teams.
I think
How about
Colorado
another?
is a step
How
above
about
Utah
another
down there.
Pac-12 team?
Oregon.
Yeah, look at Oregon. I mean, I didn't select them, but they were a lot closer than I thought. And when I looked at them, I kind of like this profile.
Yeah,
more
they
than
won.
maybe
They won at
Colorado.
Washington State. They have
They
one
did.
notable win. They have one notable win on their profile. Very good.
Well, like when you stack them up against, you know, the other two,
I like Syracuse who beat them more, and I'm not saying Syracuse is a tournament team.
Let me throw one other out there. What about Iowa?
I like them too. I mean, more than I thought I would. Yeah.
Titel, anyone else? I'll throw Iowa and Syracuse on here. Anyone else that's even close at this point, or should we finish up this bracket?
I don't think the Buckeyes are close, but like I still don't want to play them in March.
Yeah, let me throw up this Ohio State profile. Coming off of the win over a home win over Nebraska, one of the hottest teams in the nation, believe it or not. They've beaten Purdue, they've beaten Alabama, they won at Michigan State, they've beaten Nebraska. Those are 4 tournament wins, way more than Oregon has. And
And
not much of bad losses.
Just a
If
lot
they
of-
win these last 2 games here, Titel, beat Michigan home, win at Rutgers, how close are they heading into that Big Ten tournament?
I assume Joby's going to say not very, but again, I think an X factor is I honestly have no idea what the committee does with a mid-season coaching change because it's super rare.
I
in this case, to
actually
their
think
favor.
they're pretty darn close, Titel. A lot would rest with the tournament, and I think that we all overrate conference tournament impacts when we're doing our. Over the years, I've learned, okay, conference tournaments actually have less the value of a regular season game, it seems like. But Ohio State's in such a weird situation with that coaching change. They might be one team that everybody's going to be saying, okay, let's see how they do this, because they're going to have a low seed because their conference record stinks. Even if they win their final 2, they're 9-11, they're going to be on the bottom half of the draw. So, but they're playing as well, like you said, you don't want to play them right now. So Ohio State, they're so unpredictable, John. I think you and I are in the same spot. I don't know is not the acceptable answer as a pundit on a podcast, but I don't know.
They will not win at the JMA, but I'm sure they will get the revenge against Rutgers in the Big Ten tournament.
Well, if they don't win that game at Rutgers, I think they're done. I mean, they've got their next loss has to be to a team that's up top there, a Purdue, an Illinois, a Wisconsin, one of those, in my opinion, at least. Let's reveal the rest of the field real quick. Griggs, if somebody wants to know more about the rest of these teams, what should they do?
They can watch Under the Radar. We discussed them for over about an hour last night. Each team for an hour. It was what was it? A 16-hour extravaganza.
Let's get to there. Okay, as I mentioned, Grand Canyon would be the top of the 13 line, along with Samford, UC Irvine, and La Tech. We got Vermont, Charleston, Akron, and Oakland on the 14 line. High Point, Eastern Washington, who's current. Were they playing tonight or not? I don't know.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Okay, Colgate and Moorhead State on the 15 line. Norfolk State and Merrimack on the 16 line, avoiding Dayton, while Fairfield, South Dakota State, Eastern Kentucky, and Grambling all on their way to Dayton in the first 4. We've got a field of 68 here. We're done. Let's go to final thoughts. I'll leave this up here. Run through each of you any final thoughts on what we did tonight or anything else you want to discuss. Matt, let me start with you.
I think, yeah, looking at this field, we got a couple of inflection points. And I think it's one, starts right at the bottom of the 5 line. I think anywhere teams probably 5 through 9 can play their way, I think, into a 5 seed. And then I think there's a spot or 2 in the field that's still very much up for grabs. Like we took Pittsburgh and St. John's. I don't know, much preferred Villanova, but like none of those are all that safe. I think there's maybe an Ohio State, a Colorado, someone maybe not even mentioned yet, like a Drake. Someone I think could play their way into that spot because it's not secure by any means at this point.
I agree completely. We didn't mention a team like Ole Miss also, which still has the opportunities ahead of them to play their way back into the field. Joby.
Bid thieves, Matt, that could easily solve a
We could
lot of
use a
that.
couple,
But
I
you've
think,
got the
at this point.
American and the A10 hanging out there, not just because of Richmond in South Florida. Samford, oh, guys, I know that they benched their 3 best players. I think if they win out, it could have cost them a seed line. Yeah, I really believe that they had a shot at a 12 if, for instance, McNeese lost, in the Southland, or there were opportunities there. I think that was not the best way, because Samford versus Dayton, who do you pick? I don't know. It might be one of those fun 5-12 games. The point I wanted to make is along the same lines, some data. Coach Brownell from Clemson today, there was a great, I forwarded along a very interesting press conference with Capel from Pitt, but Brad Brownell had a very interesting stat that was given to him that there is not that 0 teams in the top 50 of the net, okay, have a non-schedule strength of 250 or higher in the ACC. But in the Big 12, there are 6 such teams. The Big 12's average out of conference, and I love the Big 12, you could say, but my gosh, the average conference, conference is 257 is the average out of conference schedule. That's awful. Awful. You take Kansas out, who's good. Kansas does play out of strong Kansas. It falls to 271 as an average. That's you almost can't get an average above 300 just by pure math. When you're averaging 14, in this case 13 teams. Is it a situation now with teams like Baylor and win the national title, and Houston and Kansas and all the success in the tournament? I'm not here to bash the Big 12, but it goes to the point of, is the net broken? Because how the Big 12 teams are doing it, they will go out and they keep their starters in to the very end of games. And that is a mandate that's come down from the league office. And they're running up scores against these teams that are in the 270s. And somehow the net's broken, not catching. I thought, I know KenPom doesn't adjust for that, but I thought the net did. And apparently the net doesn't do it enough.
Well,
That's bad sportsmanship that is encouraged. It leads to not getting, players who should have the non-scholarly players a chance to play. Something needs to happen. I think it will, because the outrage is starting to boil up. When you have coaches mentioning it, like Capel and Brownell, that's when it starts to get the attention that probably it will need. And a tweak would be great. I'm not saying destroy the net like some people say. I'm just saying a tweak on this factor needs to be done.
Okay. Sleeka.
I'm going to reference 2 years right here, and that's going to be 1990 and 2003. There are 2 things that are going to be in common here. Those are the only 2 years in which Dayton has ever won a conference tournament. And number 2, those are both within the friendly confines of UD Arena. Note that this year's A10 tournament will not be played at UD Arena, so it is pretty much a mortal lock that either the auto bid is going to go to the Richmond Spiders or to the Loyola Ramblers with a 100-year-old super fan on the sidelines who, I assure you, will not be giving up basketball for Lent.
Don't count out those VCU Rams either, but Mike, you're up.
Yeah, I think I tend to think that maybe you said the conference tournaments are not that important, but I think here, it's such a razor thin difference between the teams at the bottom of the at-large barrels that I think the conference tournament this year it's gonna be very pivotal, especially for the teams that are near the cut line. I mean, you look at the teams here, and it's like, think about a week ago. It's like I see like New Mexico, they're up at 8, now they're at 11. Texas a week ago was near the cut line, and they're a solid 9. So. And then now you have a team like Ohio State. Now they come out of nowhere and they're under consideration. And the way they're playing, I think they might sneak into the field. So, I think the conference tournaments this year could have a little more weight than usual.
I hope you're right, Mike. It's kind of been like when we're kind of looking back over the last few seasons here, it seems like the committee has not valued them as much as we thought they should. Almost like valuing them less than 1/30th of your season, as opposed to squarely 1/30th of your season.
Yeah.
Titel.
3 little possible matchups on the bracket I wanted to point out. Number 1, we could have a 4-5 game with BYU and Kentucky. BYU coach Mark Pope, of course, not only played at Kentucky, but won a couple of SEC titles and was team captain in 1996 when they won a little championship called the NCAA. Secondly, when St. John's beats DePaul and Georgetown next week, we could be dangerously close to a Patino versus Patino matchup in the first 4, which would be amazing.
Ooh.
And lastly, if you recall last year, when Lamont Butler hit his game winner at the buzzer, that's because FAU was literally 1 second away from making the championship game and playing UConn. As an 8-9 game, if they can win it, they might very well have a second round matchup with UConn this March.
Mhm. Greg, you want to finish the show off?
Yeah, looking at the field and with all 68 teams and with more and more, like when you get down, you're sort of holding your nose always at the end. You got Wake, you got St. John's, you got all this. And I'm just like, if we're gonna have this many teams in the tournament, shouldn't at least one spot be sort of like what the Oscars does? Some other sports do this. I think golf does this, sort of a lifetime achievement selection, to where maybe you're not having the best year, but you've had a fantastic career, or it's just a high level program that might be missing out, and they deserve selection. And I think there's without question who it should be this year. When you look at the Big Ten, not just in basketball, but in general, and how the conference was elevated when this person was there. And when you look at the Mountain West, this person's there and they've got 6 or 7 teams in. I mean, it would have to be San Jose State and head coach Tim Miles.
Okay, that's it. Griggs is off the show.
I think
On behalf of John Teitel, Matt Zukowski, Mike Cha, Joby Fortune, John Salika, and not on behalf of David Griggs, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back beginning Sunday night with our Championship Week video notebooks and coming to you with podcasts virtually every single night the rest of the way. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again real soon.